But first of all, I want to speak to viewers that may not know who you are. There was a moment that created Tommy Robinson. What was the moment that created Sargon of Akkad?
It's not really very dramatic
Right.
or very glorious. Basically, I've always been an English liberal. I've always been very concerned with our own political traditions and the history that goes right the way back to the Magna Carta, where the barons forced King John to sign the document that would protect their property from arbitrary seizures from the crown. And this system of political theory has developed for 800 years to the point where we have a very strong, very secure civic nationalist democracy. And this has been a remarkably stable system. It's been responsive to change from just any kind of quarter over hundreds of years. We haven't had a civil war since Charles I. So I think this is demonstrably the best system. And I think that it's important to maintain the integrity of the system. And the key focus of the integrity of the system is the equality of citizens. They all have to have the same rights, the same responsibilities, and the same duties. And when I see, for me it was the far left, privileging certain types of people based on arbitrary characteristics. For example, they were female, they were non-white, they were maybe not disabled because that's different, but they were, you know, like gay or whatever arbitrary characteristic, and then starting to promote these people based on those characteristics. To me, that seems deeply illiberal and unfair, and so that's how I found myself originally speaking out about this, because I was a white man and I was being told I couldn't do things because I was a white man. I mean, I'm not a particularly ambitious person, but I just, in principle, I was like, no, that's unacceptable. And that's how I got started commentating on all of this.
When was that? How long have you been doing it?
4 years ago now.
4 years ago.
Oh, well, no, in fact, no, this would be the 5th year. So
up until that point, what was you doing before that?
Oh, I was just working in office jobs.
So your life's completely changed?
Yeah, totally different, yeah. But I mean, I don't regret a moment of it. I'm glad that I actually thought, right, okay. Yeah, I mean, especially when I started doing this, I was most concerned about feminism because it was intruding in the hobbies that I like to enjoy. And I mean, it's, you know, it might not seem like the greatest problem in the world, but anything that's attacking the structural integrity of the...
Like what? Like what hobbies?
Well, literally, like, for example, affirmative action. I can't stand the idea of affirmative action, which is going to hire people based on their gender or their race. That's awful, you know, because people don't seem to understand. As soon as you say, right, I'm only going to pick certain people based on these arbitrary characteristics, then you aren't necessarily discriminating against other people on the same basis.
Which we see the BBC doing regularly now.
Absolutely. At the moment, you can go to the BBC's website and actually find positions for, and it's not even, I mean, if it was like in a historical documentary or something, I can understand we need a black person for a documentary set in Africa. Okay, totally understand. But when it's a research assistant behind the scenes and they literally say, this is not open to white British, I'm sorry, that's too far. And that's my license paying money that's subsidizing discrimination against me on the basis of my race. No, it's too far. I can't accept that.
And because I remember when I first done my interview,
yeah.
How long ago was that? Probably 2 years?
About 2 years now.
2 years ago. And I remember...
That was a dangerous interview for me to do.
It was, and I respect you completely for doing it, because you took a risk. Yeah. You took a risk. In fact, that interview might be part of the reason why you get attacked by Antifa.
Possibly, yeah.
Possibly.
They don't bring it up, though.
Don't they? No. And I remember when I spoke to you, the first time I spoke to you, and I remember asking you, so what do you do then? What do you do for a job? He said, I do this.
Yeah.
And for me, I was like, what do you mean you do this? I said, but what do you do for a job? And he said, I do this is my job. Yeah. Which I found fascinating, because I never looked into all the YouTubing and the speaking and all the different events like that. But yeah, I was fascinated by it.
It's a wondrul job. And I mean, I personally always felt very constrained working in offices. I don't really like having a boss. I like being my own boss, and I like, you know, because you don't know what you're going to be able to do tomorrow. And so there's something about it that really pushes me forward. Maybe one day I'll end up back in an office, but I hope not.
I don't think you will.
Yeah, I hope not.
Talk to us about what happened at King's College London. Was you surprised by what happened? The reason for me is that we've always seen attacks on people. Like, I've had 6 or 7 events cancelled at universities. They bracket me and target me as far right, which I'm not, but that's what they do, and that's how they manage to whip people up to attack me. Yeah. You're a liberal.
Yes.
Jordan Peterson is the people who are now, what's shocking for me is the guys and the bracket of people that are now coming under attack to silence has shifted so far. Yeah. Why would Antifa want to be silencing you? What do you think?
Well, there's a lot of potential answers to that question. I mean,
because I was one shouting fascist.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, yeah. It's not just insulting, it's just politically illiterate to call liberals fascists. But I think the problem is that Antifa are broadly made up of some variant of extremely far left Marxist. And so when you are that far left, anything to the right of Mao Zedong looks like Adolf Hitler. And so they really, I think what they do is they take a few strains of political theory. For example, like I'm in favor of the existence of a nation state, and I'm in favor of that nation state being able to control who comes in and out of their borders. Well, so is a fascist regime. That's true. These are common components that both a liberal democracy and a fascist state would also, but they would both hold that principle to be true. And so I think that's how they rationalize it in their own minds. Because these people are for no borders whatsoever. These are anarchists. Yeah. They want to get rid of the state. They want to get rid of money. They want to have...
Get rid of police.
Yeah, absolutely. They don't want any kind of hierarchical structures. And I think Jordan Peterson has demonstrated multiple times, humans are hierarchical creatures. No matter how... I mean, and this is something we've seen even from documentaries within like Antifa's own organization. They find themselves breaking into hierarchies just because naturally you get some people who are leaders and some people who are followers. It's just normal. And so I think that the fact that I'm not against the concept of hierarchy or borders or nations, and neither are fascists, I think that's how they rationalize it. That's the most charitable interpretation I can give.
So but because you don't believe in open borders, you're fair game to be attacked?
I think so, yeah.
Unbelievable.
Yeah, I mean, the people on the stage, there was an English liberal and a Jewish objectivist, and they broke in screaming that we were fascists and Nazis. It's ridiculous.
Were they students at a university? Do you know?
I believe that one of them was actually running to be a student leader of some kind at King's College London. The staff themselves, the administration of the university, there were lots of people who turned up to hear us speak who weren't students, and they refused them entry. So the only people in the room could be students, and they had a plant as well. They had about 4 or 5 people. Yeah, who had been
started shouting when all the others come in with balaclavas on.
Exactly, they stood up and started giving it up, and it's like, right, okay, so they must be students because they must have shown student ID to get in. So yes.
I wonder what the university, if the university said what they're going to do about that.
No, I've had
they're not going to do anything.
No, they're not going to do anything. And this is the problem.
Many of the professors.
Yep.
That's where it's dangerous, because what they seem to want to create is no platforming for anyone other than their views, and then what we'll create, which is what you're meant to be challenged. Your ideas are supposed to be challenged at university. That's where we're meant to breed the next generation of thinkers.
Yes, this is the problem, because all of these, the problem I think comes from the fact that the sort of Marxist ideologies they're following are very complex. You know, these are usually too difficult for just the average person to really, I mean, you know, some of the volumes, you look at them, they're impenetrable, they're thick. Like there's like 4 volumes of Capital, you know, it's ludicrously complicated, and it's the sort of thing that requires a university education in many cases to understand. And so these people go to these universities, they get taught it by professors who are highly sympathetic to it, and they find themselves radicalizing to the point where they're running around screaming that everyone is a fascist and nobody should be given a platform.
We're creating robots. That's what they look. That's what
zealots. I think
zealots,
it's zealots. It is genuine, like almost religious fervor.
It's insanity.
Yeah, and they're not interested in hearing your side of the story. They already know.
No debate. No, that's the one main thing with them. Which I say, anyone who criticises me, or anyone who disagrees with me like yourself, if they think your argument's weak and they think you're a fascist, come in and show that and prove that in a debate in a university, in the centre of free speech.
Absolutely. I mean,
but they're not up for that at all, and that's what do you think about the influence that they have and the support they have? So these groups.
Well, there are definitely people who operate in these groups who are very institutionalized, and these people are happy to join the university as administrators and faculty, and then they work their way up. This is their career. They're professors or administrators in these universities, and they're very sympathetic to these ideas. And I mean, I don't want to use the term infiltration or subversion, but it's looking very much like it could be considered to be an ideological infiltration of universities. And they are
the whole education, the entire education system.
It's incredibly left-wing. Incredibly, something like 2/3 of
80%
teachers.
Oh, 80% of professors are left-wing.
And not just left-wing, but like Corbyn supporters. And don't get me started on Corbyn. So, yeah, it's deeply disturbing to me.
So let's look. So their intention was to silence you, no platform you, and stop people hearing from you. Did that work? What reaction have you had since that speech?
Well, I mean, yeah, okay, it was rather well covered in the papers, apart from the term alt-right.
Let me get this.
Which,
now you bring that up. Let me just,
since we're on the subject.
Since we're on the subject, this is in a national newspaper,
Yeah.
because I want to get onto this about your politics.
We absolutely can.
It says the event was evacuated, an alt-right mouthpiece.
I know.
An alt-right mouthpiece.
That's pretty incredible, given the last 3 months I've spent in a sort of knockdown, dragged out debate with the alt-right to explain to them why they're wrong.
You've been the opposition to the alt-right, right?
Yes. I had the #1 trending stream on YouTube a few weeks ago when I was debating against Richard Spencer and his idea of a white ethno-state in space. Yeah, no, it's as ridiculous as it sounds. I'm not. He literally said this, right?
Yes.
He wanted a warrior aristocracy and everything.
Okay. So you're going up. You're going up head to head, which is brave again. Yeah.
Well, yeah.
Brave again to challenge these ideas.
I'm not. And the thing is, there's actual repercussions to it too, because I mean,
Well, this is the repercussion.
Not just that. All of my friends and family have been doxxed by people who claim that they're not alt-right, but they seem to be attacking me and not Richard Spencer. But we've been doxxed. We've been harassed. We've had
addresses.
Addresses. We've had my kids' schools have been messaged. They've tried. I've had to go to the local police and say, look, you're probably going to start getting reports about me from anonymous users on message boards. They're not true. They're just doing this because they're doing anything they can to hurt me. And this is a consequence of having debated the alt-right.
Your children's schools, you said?
Yeah.
What have they done with that?
They've found my stepdaughter's school and tried to go and get, let's say, he's a fascist, he's a racist, all this sort of stuff. And the irony is, these people are the ones who are the fascists and racists. They're just doing it to victimise me. I don't want to play up or anything, because I don't want to give them more credence than they deserve.
No, but I think it's important that the public are fully aware that when someone, this isn't just happening to me because I talk about Islam. Yeah. This is happening to you because you challenge the far right, essentially.
Yes, absolutely.
And it's happening to you. It's insane.
It's absolutely true.
How has that affected? So the change in what I always want to talk to people about. 5 years ago, you're working normal jobs. Now, you've got this. Yeah. And this will never leave you now.
Oh, I know. I'm well aware. Yeah, I'm well aware.
How do you feel about that? About the future? Do you have a wife?
Yeah, I'm married. Yeah.
How's your wife feel? How's your mum and dad feel? Do they worry about it? I always ask these questions because I think about.
Yeah. My mum obviously worries. My wife worries as well. My dad's very proud. So I'm happy to do what I'm doing, and I'm happy. I'm not afraid of other people's opinions. I know what I stand for, and I know what I need, and I know what I want, and I know what I'm trying to achieve. And I am the one who judges whether that's right or wrong. And I think it's right. And I think that any kind of racial discrimination by the state is wrong. I don't think they should be doing any of this sort of thing. I think that the cowardice that the mainstream shows in dealing with the alt-right is shocking, especially as the alt-right aren't unknown. Richard Spencer is a household name because he's been promoted by every far-left outlet to use him as their version of Satan. They're like, oh my God, look at evil Richard Spencer. It's like, okay, he's famous. Everyone knows who he is. Why don't you actually explain to people why he's wrong?
Rather than just...
Exactly. Don't just sit there calling him a racist. You've devalued that word to the point where no one cares. When a left-winger calls someone a racist, that's probably someone you need to be talking to be honest, because they're probably being unfairly maligned. So I'm so sick of the slurs and the lack of dialogue. It's got to change.
It has to change.
It's got to change.
On the same day that your event was attacked, so was Richard Spencer's. Richard Spencer's a man you've debated for opposite ideas.
Yep.
What do you think about his right to free speech?
Richard Spencer has as much right to speak as anyone else. And it is incumbent on us to protect his right to free speech. I mean, this is not a new argument. You can go back hundreds of years and see some of the great English philosophers who will come out and say, and point out that you don't need to defend speech that is uncontroversial. There's just no need to do it. No one's going to try and shut you down. No one's going to try and censor you. So if you say, I like the sun, then okay, no one's going to come at you. But when you say something extreme or radical or controversial or inflammatory, that's the person whose speech actually does need defending, regardless of whether you agree with their ideas or not. Because the point of free speech is it has to be applied consistently. if it's not applied consistently, eventually you find yourself with a creep, because the justification to silence that person becomes the justification to silence the next person. Now you have a precedent.
Which is what we're seeing now.
And
this move has shifted towards...
I've been a free speech warrior for about 4 or 5 years now, and this is the sort of thing that, and it's not just me, there's a whole community of people online who are liberals and who are very concerned about the infringement of these rights. And we were saying right from the start, it'll begin with Richard Spencer, but it won't end with Richard Spencer. It'll end with us, and we're the people who are genuinely concerned about the integrity of the system. As it stands, we don't want radical change to the liberal democracy. We want to preserve liberal democracy. But now, the people who are fighting for liberal democracies are being attacked, are being censored, are being silenced, or at least they're trying. And we told everyone years ago, this is the inevitable consequence of that. And then you get people saying, well, that's just a slippery slope. And it's like, well, I would say, yeah, I might agree with you if we didn't see it proven right at every single point, you know. And
if they can come for me, they can come for you.
Exactly.
And that's what they don't seem to understand.
Exactly.
Whenever I'm silenced or someone's attacked against me, I see somebody on the left cheering and celebrating.
Yep.
I think if they can do this to me, they're going to do it to you.
Well, and it's even worse than that, because when they do that, what they're saying is you have to care about your enemy's rights. No matter how much you hate someone, if you believe in the concept of rights, then you have to grant your enemy the same rights. Otherwise, what you're talking about is privileges. And that can be taken away from you if the opponent you're against is strong enough to do it. And as soon as they do it, no one's going to shed a tear for you, because you set the precedent that it's okay to deny people their rights if you think they're wrong. It's like, okay, but why is it wrong for them to do it then? You've got no argument. You've just undermined your own argument. And it's only because you lost the power to be able to silence them.
I'd like to ask what you think of the future. So say, for example, this Sunday, Martin Sellner from Generation Identity, he was meant to be given a speech. It was cancelled after, again, the usual threats. There's already 300 years of history of free speech at Speaker's Corner in London.
Yeah.
I think that will disappear this Sunday. That's what I think is going to happen, yeah? Which is a president. What do you see for the future in Britain?
I think that people have to stop pandering to the left. We have to realise that just because someone claims to have a moral high ground and that they claim that they are fighting for other people, that doesn't mean that they're telling the truth. That doesn't even mean they're telling themselves the truth. Because at the end of the day, all of this is directly in their own self-interest. They want to preserve their ability to speak on university campuses or in Speaker's Corner or wherever at the expense of other people's. This isn't a fair game. This isn't them being moral or altruistic. This is them acting in their own self-interest and using this, at least, facade of altruism as a club to beat other people. I mean, there will be no victims when Martin gives his speech at Speaker's Corner. No one's going to be a victim of that. You know, he has the right to speak. He's not hurting anyone. But he will be the victim of them if they shut him down. And so it's just incumbent on us to realise that if it doesn't matter where someone is coming from on the political spectrum when they say, I want to infringe on that person's rights, it's the infringing on the rights that's the problem. You don't have the right to do it. You don't have a justification to do it. And it has to be resisted. And if someone says they want to do it, then they are the, I guess, bad person. I don't want to use the term fascist because, like, it's something that's just thrown around too much. But they are the oppressive force in this conversation, in the political equation. It's not that they're fighting for freedom. They're not fighting for the rights of others. What they're fighting for is their own political position over someone else's. And they can justify it in any which way they want, but the point of a liberal democracy is to protect the rights of each citizen, and that's what we must adhere to.
As we sit here speaking, I believe Martin Hellner's being held by British Customs right now at an airport. So whether he even gets in, time will tell. We've seen similar things happen to Pamela Geller and Robert Spencer.
Yep.
So do you believe the government as well are part of this problem? Are they aiding and abetting? Are they...
Yeah, well, I mean, absolutely. One thing that drives me crazy...
Because the point they make that they're going to make sure there's free speech at universities. You hear them talking about pushing these guidelines. We're going to make sure everyone's allowed to. But then at the same time, they're stopping people at airports and resisting people. I know a young lad who, when the FLA march happened in London, he came in from Holland and they prevented him coming in because he was going to an FLA march. But yet we have Muslim preachers and hate preachers flying in from Saudi, Qatar, who promote intolerance, who promote homophobia, who promote anti-Semitism. They fly in and out every day.
Yeah, my problem isn't actually with the idea of a state preventing anyone that it likes from entering its borders. I think the state does have the right to do that, and I think that the elected government has the right to do that as and when they want. But the problem I have is the inconsistency of it. That's the problem, because you're absolutely right. I mean, some of the stuff that is coming out of the mouths of the most radical preachers, I mean, there was a gentleman in Florida who was literally saying that it was moral to execute gay people as a favor to their eternal souls rather than letting them sully themselves in life by being homosexual. It's like, really? Okay. And that's given a platform in universities. That's not shut down by ANTIFA or anyone else.
Yeah, because that's the hypocrisy.
Yeah.
If I explain that, so I was invited to talk at York University, okay, and there was a big hoo-ha and a big kick-off about it. And when I went through, and I was prevented from speaking there, when I went through previous speakers to look who spoke there, we've seen Mozambique, who was in Guantanamo Bay. I also then saw one radical hate preacher who is on record as speaking about violence. He's pro-violence against non-Muslims. It's just a pure hate preacher. And then when I looked at what the university and the justification they gave for inviting him, there was no protests, but they said it's part of free speech to have him there, yeah?
Well, it is.
But then they told the student union that they weren't allowed to question him on this issue, this issue, this issue. So the students are there. So then that's not free speech, that's complete propaganda. He's being given a platform to push his narrative and his agenda, and it cannot be challenged.
Well, it's a privilege.
It's
based on who he is and what he is. What he believes, and it's not being extended to other people. So, I mean, and this is the thing, right? I'm a free speech absolutist. I would not put any restrictions on people's ability to speak. I would actually rather them have the platform, because I'm a firm believer in the idea that sunlight is the best disinfectant. Let them spew their hate. I want people to hear it, because I think the average person, the average just regular person on the street is going to hear that and go, well, that's an awful person, that's an awful position, to which I don't agree, and I will personally speak out against it on social media with my friends, whatever. They're going to ruin their own reputations, they're going to ruin their own influence. They don't need to be shut down. And so it annoys me when, like, Richard Spencer is currently banned from almost every country in the EU. It's like, okay, I mean, I don't like that you do that, and I don't think you should do it. I personally wouldn't do it. But if you are going to do that, be consistent. You know, I mean, Richard Spencer isn't even calling for violence. You know, Richard Spencer just has ridiculous beliefs. But I mean, at the very least, he's not calling for violence. Whereas, as you say, they will let in any kind of preacher from the Middle East who will then actually call for the deaths of whoever, and nobody seems to care. It seems to be that Islam is a protected religion. In fact, it annoys me that it seems to be approaching blasphemy laws, some sort of secular blasphemy law.
They are implementing them now.
Well, I mean, what can you reasonably say against Islam that isn't going to get you in jail these days?
Nothing, really. I think yesterday we just had Paul Golden and Jada Franson. What's your take on that? Paul Golden and Jada Franson have been imprisoned. Yeah?
Yeah.
They've been in prison because this is my issue with it. 5 men raped a young child in a takeaway. They were on bail for 12 months running the takeaway. Young children were still going into the takeaway. Paul Golden and Jada Franson went to find them. They posted letters and leaflets warning people of them. They shouted a few obscenities. The men have been convicted. All of them have been convicted and jailed for up to 20 years. They're in prison for that. What's your view on that? What's your take on that?
My take is that the British state is deeply, deeply afraid of accusations of racism. And this is something we saw. I mean, the Rotherham case was the archetypal one. And what was the name of the doctor? Alexis J, was it, who did the report? Yeah, and she found that consistently they were just afraid of being accused of being racist. And so they would allow these terrible things to carry on because they were scared. And it's like, I don't care. Let's just assume that you are racist. We should just publicly say, right, you're all racist. Now go and arrest those people for raping children. Yeah, you're still racists. That's fine. Let's just do it. Don't worry about being called a racist. We'll still pretend that you are, but you still have an obligation to arrest these people. You know, it doesn't matter how much of a racist you are. If you catch an adult man raping a teenage girl, grooming her, giving her drugs, not letting her leave, not letting her see her parents, it doesn't matter how much of a racist you are, that's still a crime. So please do something about this, you know, but
Have you seen the acceleration? So currently, 12 months ago, were you getting doxxed? Were you coming under attack? Were you being labelled? No, it's
not like this.
It's accelerated.
Yeah, I think it is coming to a head.
What do you think that is?
Because political pressure always has to. Because the more people, the more that these things...
Because they feel that you've got nearly a million subscribers.
Yeah.
People are listening to you.
Yeah.
Your voice carries weight. and that scares them.
I think so. And the thing I think that genuinely scares them is that it's sort of centrists like myself who are now starting to say, no, look, this is beyond the pale. You know, this has just gone far too far and needs to be dealt with. You know, you can't just give these people. I mean, it's just like the Ring of Gyges. Like, it's this ancient Greek fable, a man who's given a ring of invisibility. No one can see him. And, you know, he's like, well, I'm not going to do anything wrong. And naturally, he starts becoming a horrific criminal because no one can hold him to account. And this is the same problem that we have when you give these communities what is effectively immunity from this thing. I mean, don't get me wrong, they are being punished now, but, you know, 3 or 4...
Female genital mutilation, they're still not being punished.
3 or 4 years ago, this wasn't the case. And I think that encourages. If you deal with these things with a light touch, then that encourages the people doing it and emboldens them. They think, well, I'm being protected, because they are being protected, especially when the people who are speaking out about it are being punished.
Are being attacked.
It's ridiculous.
If you can ask, if Antifa were here and you can ask them one question, what question would you ask them? If you had one thing to say to them, the people who shut you down. I ask you this because tomorrow, shall I say this in this? I ask you this because tomorrow there's an Antifa training event. It's a conference. They've got a fight club in it. This is the first of their kind. So the far left in the UK are having a mass event where they're going to hold seminars, talks, speeches, and train to fight and battle on the street. So I'm going to go to this event tomorrow, and I want to speak to them. So if you had one question you could relay to them, I'll relay it to you. I don't know how long my mouth will stay open. I don't know how much of a chance I'll get, but I'm going to try to. What would that question be?
Okay. If this event that they're doing was in fact a right-wing event where they had fight clubs and all this sort of thing, do they think that the authorities would shut them down?
Great question, because we know they would.
Exactly. Why are they giving the far left, the hard left, a light touch?
The people who are violent.
Oh, they are violent. Yeah, there's no doubt about it. I mean, we've seen it so many times. They're the ones who instigate violence for the revolutionary ideology that they pursue. They're setting up fight clubs. They regularly, you know, I mean, how many examples do we need before we say, right, okay, this is a characteristic of the hard left? So, but why aren't they being shut down? Whereas if this was a right-wing event, if this was Jada Franson and her crew doing fight clubs,
well, even if they were just doing a talk, they get shut down.
Well, yeah, but if they had anything
like this,
yeah, it would be squashed. And so,
how scared are you of the prospect of Jeremy Corbyn leading this country?
Oh my God, I'm absolutely terrified of the idea of Corbyn leading this country.
Why?
I mean, okay, because he is a genuine socialist. He's not a social democrat. He's not a social liberal. He is a democratic socialist, and that puts him in league with the sort of people who are running Venezuela at the moment. I mean, there is such a history of connection between Jeremy Corbyn and Maduro and Chavez. It's terrifying. And I mean, like, Jeremy Corbyn speaks Spanish, and he phoned up Maduro does a live State of the Nation event, and I've got a video of him phoning him up and talking to him in Spanish, saying, "Well done, comrade. You know, the revolution is doing brilliantly in Venezuela." And I think anyone who knows anything about Venezuela should be able to tell you that the revolution is going pretty bloody badly there. It's, at least for the people who live there. I mean, maybe for the Socialist Party it's doing great, but you know.
Which people here need to see. People here need to see that, which is why I see this as so important. Yeah. I see platforms, I see people like yourself as so important, because getting the truth, what you currently see is a massive rise in support for Jeremy Corbyn.
It's crazy.
From youth who know none of this.
Yep.
They see him as the opposition to the elite and the rich. That's what he's built up, and they've been very successful in his campaign.
Yeah.
I see so many people in Luton were commenting, saying Jeremy Corbyn, pro-Corbyn. I'm thinking, you mustn't have watched what I've watched. You mustn't understand what we understand.
I mean, the thing with Jeremy Corbyn, I mean, you can go back through his history. There isn't a dictator or terrorist group that he hasn't sympathised with. There is not one enemy of Britain that Jeremy Corbyn hasn't been sympathetic to. But the real thing that really solidified my opinion on Corbyn, because maybe there's always an argument to be made that understanding your enemy allows you to be able to make peace with them. You know, that's an argument you can use, and okay, fine, you know. But I don't think that's. I think if Jeremy Corbyn makes that argument, he's hiding behind it, because after the Grenfell tragedy, where the cladding of the tower caught fire and there were numerous deaths, Jeremy Corbyn's response was to go down there and start beating his little bird chest, saying, "We need to start appropriating houses in the local area."
Taking
Now that is 100% socialism, because the very core of liberalism as developed in England is that the purpose of the government is to protect private property. It's your right to own private property, and it's the government's job to make sure that nobody else violates that right by keeping your property intact, by using the police to protect you and your property in yourself from any kind of outside unjust depredations. Jeremy Corbyn's saying we need to seize houses. No, that's
Jeremy
socialism.
Corbyn wants to take rich people's homes and give them, and take them, even if they're paid for them and worked all their life for them.
Exactly.
He wants to seize their properties and give them to immigrants, poorer people, whether they be immigrants or.
I don't even care who gives them to. I don't care.
The fact he wants to take.
The fact that he's
the next government that could lead this country could be seizing and taking people's property and they've worked all their life.
And that's terrifying. That is the core of socialism, because socialism, the communists, all of the Marxists want to abolish privately owned property. They don't want you to be able to have something. They want, well, essentially the state to own everything, leading to eventually everything being completely communally owned. I disagree with that. I think that people should be able to work hard and earn the right to, well, not the right, earn the ability to actually own private property and have that protected by the state. So it goes counter to every liberal ideal.
So if there was an election, who would you vote for?
I'd have to vote May.
You'd vote for Theresa May?
I had to vote for my, well, you vote for the...
So there's a Liberal voting for Theresa May.
I don't, but the thing is, right, okay, so in this country we don't vote for the Prime Minister, you vote for a local MP and they end up making a majority party in Parliament, theoretically. So I actually had to vote for, I think it was Justin Tomlinson, who's the MP for North Swindon. I've had well, I have had email arguments with him before, because the workfare scheme, do you remember that a few years back, in 2011? Basically what they were doing is they wanted to make it so that people on benefits had to then get a job that's paid for by the government rather than the employer. And I argued with Justin Tomlinson saying, listen, this is not only immoral, I mean, the benefits are a right. You know, you don't have to do anything for these. You get these because you're a British citizen, because you're a tax-paying citizen, you pay into the system, and if you become employed, you have the right to have these benefits. That's the agreement. But not only that, you're going to encounter situations where someone is fired from a job, can't find another job, needs to claim benefit money, and they say, right, we're going to send you to find work. Looking at your CV, we're going to send you to work in whatever, a warehouse or something, and you find yourself back in the job that you were working, but you're not being paid by the company, you're being paid by the government now, and you're being paid a sliver of what you're being paid. And this actually happened. I sent him the article of a chap, he was up north where this was happening, and I was just like...
What was his response to that?
He was, I just don't think this will happen, I just don't think this is a problem. And it's like, it was just Conservative Party line, and I was like, right, okay.
The reason why when I first spoke to Dave Rubin, I see myself, I've become, from a working class background, when I heard the word liberal, I grew up angered by them.
Really?
Because I felt what had become representative as liberal. Yeah? Because liberal to me was the far left who are apologising and defending for all the problems that I've seen my whole life in my town. And then I spoke to Dave Rubin, and then he explained he's a liberal. And I thought, well, I agree with what you were saying, which is why I find you so encouraging, because you would be taking back what it is to be represented as a liberal from the apologists and the facilitators and the Marxists and the communists, and because they've taken the barrier as liberal. Which is why when I listen to you, I listen to you and I listen to Dave Rubin, and even the fact that I'm in group messages with lots of working class lads, and many of them are followers of yourself.
Good.
Which they would never have been followers of liberals, in the sense of what liberalism is.
Well, the liberals today aren't liberals, they're basically socialists. And they hide behind the label liberal because, I mean, I think that the political philosophy of liberalism is eminently reputable. You know, it's very hard to attack it on a moral ground, find an inconsistency within it to, leverage it open. And so it's a great curtain to put across yourself if you are some form of Marxist or socialist or any kind of radical. You can say, oh, I'm just a left-wing liberal. It's like, no, you're not. You know, you're against capitalism. You're against people's rights. You're against the constituent of the state at the moment. You are not a liberal. You know, liberals are free marketeers. Liberals are universalists. They want human rights for everyone. They think that these are important, and they understand why. They've got the political theory to demonstrate why these are important. And these people don't hold to that at all. They're actually progressives. And I think the problem with progressives and why they've been able to hide behind liberalism is that liberalism and progressivism have certain tenets in common, but different methodologies. So the consequence of liberalism is tolerance. I mean, we tolerate things that are different to ourselves as long as they are not being intolerant of ourselves, and that's just. That's why religious toleration and racial and ethnic toleration come from. This is where anti-racism came from. But these are a consequence of living to liberal principles and individualist principles. You treat people as the individual, and racism falls away. There's no justification for racism whatsoever. This isn't the goal of liberal principles, though. This isn't something that. Tolerance isn't the purpose of liberal principles. The purpose of liberal principles is the protection of the individual citizen. It just happens that in the goal and in the search for that, the racism, religious discrimination, things like that, they all fall away. But for progressives, tolerance is the goal. So it doesn't matter how bad something is. It doesn't matter how intolerant something is. If they have decided to categorize something as an oppressed minority, because when you view the world through a Marxist lens, you have just the oppressor and the oppressed, and it has to be that way. Even if you can't actually find any oppression in these, I hate talking to Americans about Muslims in Britain, because they're like, well, Muslims in Britain are oppressed. Oh, shut the fuck up. you must be joking. You must be joking. They're privileged, okay? But the point is
they have the privilege.
Yeah,
which is insane.
Exactly. But they can't understand that, and so yeah, there's kind of like this overlap there, but it's not for the same reasons. And so it's very easy for a progressive to say, oh, I'm just a liberal. I'm for tolerance as well. And it's like, well, of course I'm for tolerance, but not as the driving goal of what I'm trying to achieve, whereas that is the driving goal. They want to compartmentalize and basically. I think they want everything to be some kind of minority category, which is strange. But I know that sounds odd, but I think that that's ultimately their goal. So I think that's one of the reasons they're for mass immigration. I've seen too many of them who cheer at the idea of white people becoming minorities in their own country. Now, that's not something I actually care about personally, because I rather consider myself kind of aracial in that regard. I don't really care. I'm more concerned about the philosophy of it. But it's weird to want to
celebrate.
Yeah.
To celebrate.
Yeah, I would never celebrate Indians becoming a minority in India, and I wouldn't suggest opening borders so that millions of South Americans. Exactly, I would never celebrate Indian politicians opening their borders so millions of South Americans could go in. Who are you going to call racist at this point? But it's still going to have an effect on the native culture, and I think that they should have a right to enjoy their culture. And like I said, I don't care about the racial aspect, but it just seems predatory, and that's the sort of problem I have with it. It's the joy of it, and I find it deeply disturbing. Just to end,
my end goal is to tackle the Islamisation of Britain.
Mm-hmm.
What's yours?
Well, I mean, that will undoubtedly be involved in my goal. My goal is to reassert traditional British liberal values. And believe it or not, I think Jacob Rees-Mogg is actually one of the best people for this, and Farage as well. People call them conservatives, but what they are is sort of English classical liberals. And I mean, Mogg just recently had a speech in Parliament where he was expounding the virtue of free speech in much the same way I'm doing here, because he understands the philosophy behind it and the political consistency that must be upheld there. And honestly, unfortunately, Islam is not in agreement with these. Islam is an illiberal political ideology. I mean, it's not just a religion, there is a political ideology wrapped up in there as well, and it is...
Do you understand how Islamophobic that is?
Oh, I am... Do you know what... No, that's absolutely true, but you know what cracks me up? Is that a phobia is an irrational fear. You didn't reason yourself into it, so you can't be expected to be held accountable for it. I mean, I'm arachnophobic. Oh, you're just such a bigot against spiders. Yes. Yeah. I guess I can't help it. I hate the term phobia when it's used politically. But yeah, Islam is a totally illiberal philosophy. I mean, it is the oppressive, patriarchal, theocratic terror that the left should be worried about. But instead, they're worried about white men who happen to want to protect their rights and not make them wear coverings and not make them second-class citizens, which is what Islam does to women. And I'm completely against it. I could never, ever support any philosophy or ideology that suggested that women should have less rights than men. If they work, if they're voting citizens, they should have exactly the same.
We will make America great again.